They were supposed to protect you, but they watched you break. They were supposed to build you, but they handed you tools made of guilt, silence, and shame. They didn't hit you. They didn't abandon you. They stayed and slowly taught you to abandon yourself. These aren't strangers. They're blood, family, the people you were told to love no matter what, even when what meant constant criticism, emotional control, and manipulation masked as concern. You grew up believing love meant pain, that loyalty meant silence, that being good meant staying small, because every time you stood tall, you were too much. Every time you set a boundary, you were disrespectful. Every time you spoke your truth, you were ungrateful. And so, you learned to shrink. You smiled through insults. You excused their anger. You called abuse tradition. You called pressure family values. You told yourself, this is just how they are. But it's not. It's toxic. These family members don't break you with violence. They break you with influence. They rewrite your identity without ever raising their voice. They plant guilt like a seed and watch you water it with obedience. And worst of all, they convince you it's love. But it's not. There are 5 of them. 5 roles that hide behind the mask of kinship. They don't want connection. They want compliance. And they don't want you to grow, because your growth exposes their dysfunction. This is not an attack on family. It's a call to wake up, because the most dangerous chains are the ones that sound like, but they're your blood. Let's cut them, one lie at a time. The controller in disguise. They don't shout. They worry. They don't forbid. They suggest. But every suggestion feels like a rule you're not allowed to break. They say they care. They say they want what's best for you. But somehow, what's best for you always looks exactly like what makes them feel safe. You tell them your dream. They say, that's not realistic. You express a boundary. They sigh and say, you've changed. You date someone they don't approve of. They don't attack. They just go silent long enough to make you feel guilty. This isn't love. It's emotional programming. It's the slow conditioning of acceptable behavior, filtered through their fear, their regrets, their need to feel in control of you. You were never allowed to explore, not because they hated you, but because your freedom threatened their authority. You thought they were wise, but they were just afraid. Afraid that if you became your own person, you'd no longer need their approval. And their power? It would vanish. So they wrapped it in phrases like, "We just don't want you to struggle. We've been through more than you know. We only say this because we care." But care doesn't clip your wings. It doesn't punish individuality. And it doesn't measure your worth by how closely you obey. The controller will never scream. They don't need to. You've been trained to flinch at their disappointment. You think rebellion is disrespect, when in reality, it's the first sign that you're finally waking up. This family member doesn't want to hurt you. They want to own your decisions in the name of protection. But love without freedom is not protection. It's a prison with soft walls. The perpetual victim. They don't raise their voice. They raise their pain. And in every story, they are the wounded one, the misunderstood, unappreciated, unsupported soul. You can never do enough. You can never be enough, because their suffering is bottomless, and you're the bucket expected to fill it. They remind you of the favors they did, the sacrifices they made, the tears they shed, not to connect, but to collect. Guilt, obedience, silence. You express your truth. They cry. You set a boundary. They get hurt. You pursue your path. They say you're leaving them behind. This isn't sadness. It's emotional blackmail. And the price of their peace is always your self-erasure. They don't confront. They collapse. They don't manipulate directly. They break themselves in front of you. So you feel like the one holding the hammer. You'll find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do, feeling bad for needs you never voiced, avoiding success because it might upset them, dimming your light so they don't feel overshadowed. But here's the truth. They don't want healing. They want a stage. And your role in their script is to play the savior forever. You were not born to fix them. You were not made to be a mirror that only reflects what makes them feel okay. Because true love doesn't need you to shrink. True family doesn't tether your self-worth to their approval. And true connection doesn't punish you for being whole while they remain broken. The perpetual victim is not weak. They are strategic. And as long as you confuse guilt with love, they will own you with a whisper. The subtle saboteur. They never yell. They suggest. They never insult. They just joke. And every time it stings, they say you're too sensitive. You'll bring them good news. They'll pause and say, "Let's see how long that lasts." You'll share a dream. They'll chuckle. You've always been the dramatic one. You'll finally start believing in yourself. They'll remind you of that one time you failed. This is not feedback. It's camouflaged contempt. And it's been happening for so long, you've started calling it normal. You think they care. But what they really care about is positioning. If you grow, they shrink. If you rise, their status drops. So they don't stop you. They just seed doubt. They hide behind sarcasm. Behind, "I'm just looking out for you." Behind every smile that says, "I love you," but eyes that say, "You'll never make it." And the worst part? They convince you it's all in your head, that you're the problem, that you're too proud, too emotional, too much. But you're not too much. You're just finally outgrowing their limits. And they hate that. This family member doesn't need control. They just need you to stay small. And they'll use kindness, humor, and even support. As long as it keeps you doubting yourself. But you're starting to notice the tone, the patterns, the way your energy drops after every conversation. And one day, you'll realize this wasn't love. It was a slow, smiling sabotage, a calculated way to dim your light so theirs looked brighter. That's not family. That's fear, disguised as closeness. The dominator. They don't earn respect. They demand it, not through leadership, but through intimidation. You know them by the silence that follows their name. By the way, everyone holds their breath when they walk into a room. By the way decisions are made around them. Not with them. They don't ask. They command. And if you push back, they explode. Or worse, they punish you with cold, calculated distance. You were taught to respect them, but what you really learned was to fear them, to tiptoe, to apologize first, to hide your truth behind politeness and compliance. They use phrases like, "under my roof," "I don't care what you think," "you think you know better than me?" But authority without empathy is not leadership. It's emotional tyranny. They treat family like a kingdom, where their title justifies control. And if you ever assert yourself, they label it disrespect. This isn't strength. It's insecurity with volume. And for years, you confused survival with honor. You thought being quiet meant being loyal. But loyalty without safety is just bonded fear. And no amount of obedience will ever make them love you more. Because love is not what they're after. Control is. You don't need to beat them. You just need to stop kneeling. to stop explaining yourself, to stop setting yourself on fire just to keep them warm. They are not the center of your world. They are just the loudest shadow. And it's time you turned on the light. The silent manipulator. They never argue. They never raise their voice. They don't control through force. They control through access. They collect information. They listen when you vent. They nod, comfort, sympathize. And then weaponize everything you said when the time is right. They act innocent. They act neutral. They pretend to stay out of the drama. But they always know how to steer it. They talk behind closed doors, drop quiet comments in the right ears, whisper suggestions that turn people against each other. And when the damage is done, they say, "I didn't mean anything by it." This is not conflict. This is covert control. And the scariest part? They always look like the victim. They'll say, "I just want peace. I hate confrontation. I didn't tell anyone, except just one person." But somehow, your secrets don't stay safe. Your name gets misunderstood, and your story gets rewritten by someone who swears they love you. They win by staying clean, by keeping their hands off the knife, even though they told someone else where to stab. And if you call them out, they'll cry. They'll say, "You're overreacting." They'll turn the family against you with phrases like, "He's always so dramatic. She's changed lately." But you're not the problem. You're just the only one who finally saw the strings. This person thrives in confusion. They need things messy so they can stay relevant. They need you uncertain so they can offer support. But that support always comes with a cost. Control without accountability. To break free, you don't need to scream. You just need to stop playing along. Because the moment you see them clearly, they lose the one thing that gave them power: your trust. Why haven't you walked away? Why haven't you cut the cord? Why are you still explaining yourself to people who never listen? Because they're family? Because they raised you? Because they tell you, "But we're all you've got"? No, they're not all you've got. They're just all you've been allowed to have. You've been trained to believe that blood equals loyalty, that suffering in silence is maturity, that walking away is betrayal. But here's the truth. Staying with people who hurt you isn't love. It's learned helplessness. You've been guilted, gaslighted, shamed for speaking up, labeled dramatic, ungrateful, selfish, all for doing the one thing no one else in the family had the courage to do: tell the truth. And that's the moment you became dangerous. Because when one person sees clearly, the whole system starts to crack. And families built on denial, ego, and unspoken rules, they don't want healing. They want silence. You were never the problem. You were the mirror. And they didn't like what they saw in your reflection. But here's what they never taught you. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they share your last name. You don't have to shrink just to keep them comfortable. And you're allowed to outgrow people, even if they raised you. This isn't disrespect. This is self-respect. And the longer you stay, the more you bleed slowly, while they call it tradition. It ends now. Not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop bleeding for their comfort. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to fight them. You just have to stop giving them authority over your life. Because the truth is, they didn't raise you to be free. They raised you to be manageable, predictable, easy to influence. And the moment you start making choices that don't need their approval, they panic. They guilt trip. They claim you've become selfish. But selfishness is not the crime they're accusing you of. What really scares them? You've become sovereign. You've stopped asking permission. You've started saying no. You've become someone they can't guilt into silence. And that makes you dangerous to the system. But that's not rebellion. That's reclamation. Because you've realized love doesn't mean loyalty to dysfunction. Respect doesn't mean absorbing disrespect. And family doesn't mean sacrificing your peace just to be accepted. You get to build your own legacy. You get to create your own definitions of love, of connection, of truth. And yes, that might mean less phone calls, less fake gatherings, less pretending everything's okay. But what you lose in proximity, you gain in power. And what you sacrifice in tradition, you reclaim in authenticity. Some will say you've changed. Some will say you're cold. Let them. Because the real you, the one that's been buried under years of guilt, fear, he's not cold. He's free. And freedom doesn't feel like rebellion. It feels like finally breathing without asking for permission. Family isn't who shares your name. It's who honors your soul. It's the people who let you speak without flinching, who challenge you without controlling you, who see your power and don't feel the need to shrink it. You were taught that family is forever, but no one told you. Dysfunction doesn't get a lifetime pass. You were told, don't air dirty laundry. Keep the family together. Blood is thicker than water. But here's the truth. No one tells you. Boundaries are thicker than blood. You're allowed to cut ties, to redefine connection, to say, this version of love doesn't feel like love to me anymore. You're allowed to protect your peace, even if it breaks tradition, even if it disappoints them, because family isn't about forced loyalty. It's about mutual respect. And if that respect isn't there, what you're calling family is just a cycle of emotional debt. The ones who truly love you won't need you to play small. They won't weaponize the past. They won't guilt you into silence. They'll stand with you, not above you, not behind you, with you. And when you build that kind of connection, whether it's with a friend, a partner, or even just yourself, you've already started creating a new kind of family. One where love doesn't come with a scoreboard, where growth isn't punished, where your truth is welcome, not treated as betrayal. You're not betraying your roots. You're planting new ones. And from that soil, a new legacy is about to grow. You don't need to explain yourself anymore, not to them, not to anyone. Because the moment you saw them clearly, you stopped seeking permission to be whole. You're not angry, you're awake. And awakening doesn't require drama. It just requires distance from noise, from guilt, from expectations that were never yours to carry. You no longer flinch at the word family. You just understand it deeper. It's not who you were born to. It's who you choose to heal with. You don't hate them. You've just outgrown the role they gave you. You're no longer the fixer, the peacekeeper, the emotional sponge. You're the architect now of your space, your energy, your bloodline. And from this moment forward, you build relationships on truth, not obligation, on freedom, not fear, on respect, not hierarchy. They may never understand. They may gossip, twist, accuse. Let them. That's their language. You've learned a new one. Silence without submission. Distance without resentment. Love without loyalty to pain. This is how the cycle breaks. Not with screaming, but with someone who finally says, I don't have to carry this anymore. And now, you don't. You're not cold. You're clear. You're not cruel. You're conscious. And the man who chooses clarity over comfort, he doesn't burn bridges. He builds boundaries that never collapse again.